Look, I just want to be associated with the words of welcome to our new members on the committee, and to acknowledge the work of the former members as well, and to welcome both Alva and Emma here this morning, and to thank you for your contributions. And I think it's very obvious from what you have said this morning, but obviously what I know myself as well, that there's hugely important work ongoing where women are meeting and discussing issues of importance, and there's great value in that. But there is a sense that it in some way can be disjointed, in that it's not leading to real change. And I suppose I'm very interested in, Alva, what you're talking about, the Encounters programme there, where, it brought groups together with an area or shared interest and made the connection. And I think it was the assumption then that would develop, and which it did in some cases, but not in others because of maybe such as lack of funding or support. You're saying Women's Aid and Women's Aid Federation have reconnected and are doing important work, and that's, we know gender-based violence is a huge issue. So has there been any evaluation of the Encounters programme done, and to see, or why was it only limited to 1 year? I mean, there's so many different groups and areas of interest.
Well, that's a very fair question, I think, and we would very much like to have done an evaluation, but there wasn't any funding for it. In fact, there was very minimal funding for that particular programme, and while, rather, it wasn't so much as an ambition as a hope that bringing groups, like-minded groups together one way and another would open up the possibility of cooperative work. Obviously, what you can accomplish in a 2-hour Zoom encounter is hugely limited. And in fact, the fact that anything at all emerged from it is kind of a miracle, and a great a tribute to the women who were actually involved in those conversations. Where it tended to work best was where you had two organisations meeting up. So whether that was the Women's Aid Federation or Women's Aid here in the South meeting together, and they had a prior connection which had kind of dissipated a bit. So there was already some kind of connection, which then it gave them a boost. The encounter gave them a boost to move forward. It sort of whetted their appetite or reawakened their appetite to work together. Similarly with the Rainbow Project and LGBT Ireland, it was, an exactly similar kind of situation. Those two cases worked very well. Also with the Women's Collective Ireland and the Shankill and Fold centres, that worked very, very well. Others were very much more difficult. I mean, we had a meeting between, I think it was Her Story in Leitrim and Women in Loyalism. And that was a really, really, really interesting, very interesting meeting and conversation, but it was difficult for it to move forward. It would have needed further encounters. It needed more time to develop and to mature into something that might actually happen practically on the ground. And I think it was still worth doing. There were areas where we couldn't really reach. We wanted very much to bring traveller women, north and south, together, but it was just really difficult to set that up. We would have needed to have had a community development worker working with us to actually help that, and indeed to further the encounters we had between migrant groups. But all of those, it was about mapping out what are, some of, at least a good number of the groups that we really want to be able to reach, and almost a kind of a learning in where it works and where you need actually a lot more structure and a lot more funding. It's really having the structures there that are funded. And while, we've made the point so often that I think myself that anything this committee can do in terms of its recommendations in furthering this kind of cooperative, collaborative work is so important. One of the things, I might say, Deputy, that really struck me during the encounter programmes and then in some subsequent work I've been involved in is that we focus a lot on, and quite rightly, on how, on the situation, if you like, on how things work for women. I'm talking about working with women, how things work for women in the North. there is not enough emphasis, I think, very often on understanding that women in the South, in community-based situations across the board, really have very little understanding of the north of Ireland and very little experience of it. I mean, it may be different for yourself in a border county, but we had a group from Kerry, for example, in the Women's Collective, who met with a group from, I can't remember where in the north now, it wasn't in Encounters, it was in another programme. And I mean, the Kerry women had never been to the north of Ireland, and the women from that north of Ireland group, only one of them had been to Dublin. The fear and the suspicion and the misperceptions are enormous. And then the relief and what you can only describe as a kind of a joy in discovering that actually we're all just real people, and the opening up of dialogue, and that leading in turn to at least the possibility of broaching the difficult political issues. And they are difficult, as we all know, but they can't even be broached until the other fears and suspicions somehow, until the ice is broken. These are processes that take a long time. They do really take a long time. I can only say that I always wanted to be able to bring Taoiseach and Taoiseach and deputies and ministers and I don't know what not into these environments to say, look at the work that can be done if there is a structure and there is some patience and also a real willingness to listen. That you stand back and you sit back and you listen to what's happening there.
I know, and I often say here, we've a lot more in common as women, regardless of what part of the globe we're from, than we have that is different.
You start off with what there is in common, which, gets worked out, and then you can move on to what people don't have in common,
and
what the differences
barriers
are,
and
to understanding those different histories. Because again, for the majority of people, not just women, there is not much understanding of history. So bringing it to that point is so important for, I suppose, what we might call as the eventual outcome in this island, which I obviously hope will be reunification. But I mean, that can't happen without there being mutual understanding. It won't happen without that. It can't.
It's really important. And we do engage with the Shared Island Unit. So one of the things we can be raising with them is why was the funding for the All Ireland's Women's Forum cut? Why were the recommendations not taken on board? I mean, what?
Propose that we do that. And we'd like them in to answer that very question. Because I think it's critical to what you're saying.
It's absolutely. I do propose that we raise it with the Shared Island Unit.
We'll do that straight away.
Absolutely, it's really important work. And just to mention, a lot of my constituents come to me, women who have been in violent relationships, and I find that one of the huge difficulties they face is dealing with the justice system. The justice system, which is very much a male-dominated, the court, the Gardaí here, the courts, the system, the prison system. I'm just wondering if that's an issue that, because of the prevalence of gender-based violence across Ireland, and particularly, as you said, it's extremely prevalent in the north. I mean, that it's something, again, that I think there needs to be an awareness of and a change, a real change brought around to understanding how the court system does not support people in those situations.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, again, I think there is, there are legislation differs, and the ways in which the systems don't work in identical ways, the judicial systems, but there is a lot of common ground. And the fact that it is very difficult for a woman going through that system is really very similar north and south. And I think that there's quite a lot of cooperative work, as I understand it, and certainly exchanging information between Women's Aid Federation and Women's Aid here. But again, I mean, these are both organisations which have huge service responsibilities. So having that space and that time to actually look at the cooperative work that could be done needs some separate funding, actually, because of the service responsibilities in each case. I know that. I happen to be chair of Women's Aid at present here, and you know there is not a spare halfpenny there. So the time taken to go and do a meeting with their colleagues in Belfast, say, or in Derry, is very important, but really hard to find that and to find the staff to do these things, and just as hard, I know, in the north. But the possibilities, well, the possibilities are absolutely there, and the situation, it is an emergency situation. We're in an emergency every single day.
Yeah.
I don't have to tell you that. We know that we're in that emergency situation, and you know, to see a focus of attention being placed simply on that one area would be absolutely incredible. It would be fantastic, actually. Really would.